invited to participate in tonight's concert. Although I'm not a musician or an instrumentalist, as Jagannath has pointed out in one of his email correspondence, the spoken word also has its own artistry, and I hope you will agree. I have 3 stories I'd like to share with you tonight. The first one is called The Miller, His Son, and Their Donkey. It's an Aesop's fable. And the other 2 are A Single Grain of Rice and The Cracked Water Pot. They're both traditional folk tales, and I believe they both originate from India. So, The Miller, His Son, and Their Donkey. A miller, accompanied by his young son, was leading their donkey to market, hoping to find a buyer. Along the way, they passed a group of young girls, talking and laughing. The miller heard them say, "Did you ever see such a pair of fools to be trudging along the dusty road when they might be riding?" The miller thought there was some sense in what they said. So he had his son mount and ride the donkey while he walked along beside. Further along the road, they met up with some of the miller's good buddies, and they chided the miller. "You'll spoil that son of yours, letting him ride while you toil along on foot. Make him walk, young lazy bones, it'll do him good." So he took his son's place on the donkey's back and rode while the boy trotted along behind. But they had not gone far when they passed a group of mothers and small children, and the miller heard them say, "Did you ever see such a selfish old man? See how he rides in comfort while he makes his poor little boy follow along as best he can on foot." So the miller had his son get up with him on the donkey, and they rode along together. They were almost to the town when they passed a traveler who greeted the miller and asked him whether the donkey that they were riding was his own or hired. The miller replied that it was his own, and that he was bringing it to market to sell. "Good heavens!" exclaimed the man. "With a load like that, the poor beast will be so exhausted by the time you get there that no one will want to look at him. Why, you'd do better to carry him." "Well," thought the miller, "we can try." So they got down, tied the beast's legs together with a rope, and slung him on a pole. So at last arrived into town, carrying the beast between them. Now, this was so absurd a sight that all the people came running out to laugh and jeer and tease the miller and his son unmercifully. At about this time, they were crossing a bridge over a river when the donkey, frightened by all the noise and commotion and its unusual position, kicked and struggled until he broke the ropes and fell into the river and was drowned. The miller, vexed and ashamed, turned around and made his way home again, having found that in trying to please all, he had pleased no one. And he had lost his donkey besides. Single grain of rice. Once there was a good king who ruled wisely and who ruled well. He was loved by all the subjects of his kingdom. One day, the king called his 4 daughters to him and told them that he was going away on a long journey. "I will be away for quite some time," he told them. "In my absence, I am leaving the 4 of you in charge. But before I go, I wish to leave each of you a gift. Consider it well." With that, he placed a single grain of rice in each daughter's hand. Then he was gone. The first daughter went straight up to her room, found her most elaborately ornamented casket, put the grain of rice inside, and placed it by her bed. where she gazed at it every day. The second daughter locked her grain of rice in a safe box and hid it in the darkest, most obscure corner of the closet. The third daughter looked at her grain of rice and thought, this grain of rice is no different than any other grain of rice, and she threw hers away. But the fourth daughter took her grain of rice, and she wondered about the meaning of the gift. She thought about that grain of rice for a long, long time. Time passed, years went by, and the four daughters ruled in the absence of the father, the king. Then one day the king returned. He greeted each of his daughters, and then asked to see what had become of the gifts he had left them. The first daughter went to her room, brought down her casket, and presented it to her father. The second daughter unlocked her grain of rice and surrendered it to the king. The third daughter rushed to the pantry and ran back, calling, "Here, father, here's a grain of rice." The fourth daughter just stood there, very quiet, very still, said nothing. "My daughter," said the king, "what has happened to your gift? Where is your grain of rice?" "My father," she began, "I thought about that grain of rice for a long time before I discovered the meaning of the gift. That grain of rice is a seed, so I planted it. It grew, and from it I harvested other seeds, which I also planted and harvested. Father, I have continued to do this. Come and see the results." She led the king, her father, to a window, which opened out on an enormous crop of rice, stretching as far as the eye could see, enough to feed the entire kingdom. The king took off his golden crown and placed it on her head. "Well done, my daughter," he said. "You have truly learned the wisdom to rule." The cracked water pot. A water bearer had two large pots, one on either end of a long pole which he carried on his shoulders. One of the pots had a crack in its side, and while the other pot was sound and whole and always delivered a full load of water at the end of the long walk back to the house from the stream, the cracked water pot always arrived half full. Day after day, this went on. As months turned to years, the pot became more and more frustrated and humiliated at its inability to carry out the function for which it had been created. At last one day, it spoke to the water bearer by the stream. "I'm ashamed of myself," it said, "and I want to apologize to you." "Why?" asked the water bearer. "What for?" "Well, you see that I have this crack in my side that causes me to leak water all the way back from the stream. Because of my flaws, you put in all this work, and you never get the full value of your efforts." The water bearer only smiled. "It's time to return home," he said. "It's a beautiful day. Why not just relax and try to enjoy the scenery on the way home? Pay attention to what you see." And as they traveled home, the pot looked around, and indeed, there were many beautiful wildflowers growing along the path as they walked back to the house, and that cheered it up some. But when they arrived back home, the pot had once again leaked out half its contents. "Did you notice," asked the water bearer, "that all the flowers were growing only on your side of the path? That is because of you. I have always known about your flaw, and I took advantage of it. I planted seeds all along the path, and every day as we walk back from the stream, you have watered them. Without you being exactly the way you are, this would not have been possible.